My name is Daniel Seligman. We are at Club Lambie in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I take care of the booking at this club. I have been doing that for the last 3 months. I also am the creative director of the Pop Montreal Music Festival, which I started with a few other people 5 years ago. And I also work in music management. I manage an artist named So-Called. He does like a kind of hybrid version of hip-hop, klezmer, electro, kind of gypsy music. And I've also worked with a band called the Unicorns in the past and another band called Stars, and I do various promotion throughout the city and other stuff as well. So Club Lambie is, well, we're here now. It's like a 300 and something capacity venue that it's in an old bank, and it's right beside it, I think, the only legal swingers club in North America. So that's a bit of trivia for you. It's been functioning for a couple of years. It's owned by two Haitian brothers who both have full-time jobs, but they're one of them who I originally approached to start working with. He was involved with another music festival in Montreal called Nuit d'Afrique, and yeah, so. I kind of like strolled in one day because I'm in promotion and the music festival. I'm always looking for new venues and new places to do shows. And I walked in one day and I was like, wow, this place is awesome. It's got like white curtains and soft lighting and like a nice vibe. So I just said, yeah, I'd love to do a show here. And then we just started talking, and he's like, yeah, we're looking for business partners to do something. So within like a couple of weeks, I had kind of become the club booker of the venue. So it's been quite a bit of work, but a lot of fun. Like the people who own the club and people who work here are super cool, and it's been an interesting experience, and I'm not sick of it yet, but it's only been a couple months. So Pop Montreal is an independent music festival that I think we try to, like, we want to be kind of like an inclusive reflection of the Montreal music community here. So we work with a lot of different promoters and artists on co-presenting events and co-curation, and we have like a film festival and a conference, and we do like a big art fair and stuff. So we kind of it started out of like, in one way, like we saw like an opportunity and saw a lot of amazing music happening in the city and not necessarily a place for it, and also because we'd been involved and gone to like South by South and CMJ and North by Northeast and CMW in Toronto, and felt something lacking from the musicians' perspective. Like they were just straight kind of like showcasey, like business type of events. Like you kind of felt like, well, you're kind of cattle being led through this like cycle, like show up, don't sound check, play in front of a bunch of disinterested people who are standing at the back of the bar talking. And it wasn't really about like the art and the performance and like any sense of like, I don't know, spectacle or community or anything like that. So in a way, Pop Montreal was like a reaction against other festivals, and it's really kind of crystallized, in my mind at least, to become like an event that is special and creates something unique and interesting and brings people together. I mean, that's kind of the most important thing, is that we're like working communally together to create an event that is exciting and challenging and interesting and all that. It takes place throughout the city in about 30 different venues. Like this will be one of them. I don't know if you'll have a chance to check out other venues in the city, but like there's Casa del Popolo and Sala Rosa Main Hall, and then we use like bigger theaters like Spectrum and Metropolis and the Cabaret. So we kind of run the gamut, like from the bigger shows, like we've had Franz Ferdinand and Interpol, and in like the Metropolis we even did a show with Beck last year at the Bell Center, which wasn't definitely not like a priority to do like a big stadium show, but I mean it just worked out. So but and it starts with like small little spaces like the Barfly, which are 65 capacity, and we always like find alternative loft venues and stuff like that. Yeah, and it's almost become like a full year-round thing. Like, I mean, I do the booking here, but we do an outdoor stage during the summer with another festival called the Fringe Festival, which is, I think, an international like theater circuit festival or whatever. So we do the outdoor. We help curate the outdoor stage with them, and we do like a thing called Fringe Pop with about 20 different bands, free outdoor shows, and then we're actually right now there's like a pop-off tour that's going through Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes, and we're taking 2 bands, kind of young emerging bands in Montreal, Duchess Says and The Lovely Feathers, and they're doing like a regional tour, and we helped organize that and promote that and stuff. So it's really kind of like, you know, the festival itself is like a 5-day event, but there's stuff that kind of just happens all year round. I mean, I guess every city works a little differently, but in Montreal, there's like, you know, at least a half a dozen promoters that are working like full year round on like producing and promoting shows, and they aren't necessarily like, they don't own their own clubs, they rent out spaces and they put on shows or whatever. So, I mean, at the top, there's like Gillette and Spectra, who are like the big guys who, you know, Gillette owns part of, I think they own the Bell Center, and so, but they do shows like all throughout the year. They do like big budget shows. They do, you know, like the Radiohead and this and that, and then Spectra is more on the French side, but they do a lot of jazz stuff and whatnot, and then there's Blue Skies Turn Black, who kind of, they started about a year before Pop Montreal, but they're kind of like, in a way, brothers in arms of Pop Montreal, because we really developed together, and like they're young guys my age, and we started really like from the beginning like working with similar bands. They're like definitely more on the punk rock side than I am. Like their history, they started a record label, but we've always worked together, and so they're becoming kind of, you know, like they were promoting Death Cab for Cutie and bands like that before they became really big artists, so they've kind of like grown up with some of these bands, and now they're becoming like more and more successful and booking bigger and bigger shows, but they still do like a lot of kind of like mid-level shows. So they'd come to me and say, oh, Dan, like we're looking for a hold for such and such a band on this date, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we have it available, no problem. And then they'd do like all the promotion and marketing and this and that. They'd take care of like, you know, guaranteeing the band money, this and that. That's not my problem. You know, I'm just facilitating the venue. I'm kind of like basically like a middleman for the venue. I don't own the venue, but I make sure that it's all like I worked on getting a few bartenders in here if there's like, if we need to rent a sound guy, this and that. So I kind of like handle booking of the club, but I also will promote shows every once in a while, and also in that respect, I haven't given any guarantees for bands. Like I'll just say it's a door deal, you know, like sure, you can play a show here. These are the parameters. There's like $200 rent. You know, if you want posters, send us the poster. I'll charge you, you know, 35 cents for postering around the city. Those kind of things, you know. So I want to work kind of collaboratively with a lot of the younger bands who are like starting out in Montreal, because I really do believe that you kind of like, it's good to learn these things as a band, to like go out, and if you're going to do a show, then like make sure things are taken care of. Like you promote it, you send press releases out, because it's easy to just say, oh, I want to play a show, and then not do anything about it, and then you show up and then you're disappointed because it's not promoted properly. But you know, I don't like, I'm so busy with all kinds of different things. Like it's not my sole job. Like maybe if I was just a promoter, then I'd like change my whole kind of philosophy on how to book the club. But you know, it's just, I kind of want like some of these bands to like, you know, I want to give them like advice and a hand and help them out, but I also want to like push them a little to do a lot of it on their own, the whole, you know, DIY or whatever. So, well, a lot of the stuff I'm already familiar with, and I kind of like, I'm becoming a little more careful on what I put in here now. Like at the beginning, I wanted to just like do as much as possible just to kind of like spread the word and like, and have people come in and check out the venue. But now it's like, this place doesn't really work unless there's at least like 100 people in the room, you know, like financially speaking. You can do 50 people, but like, you know, we can, like the last couple of shows we've had over 350 people, you know, and like, and in that case, everyone is happy. Like, you know, the band makes money, the bar makes money, the promoter makes money. So I realize you're not going to get 300 people in here every night, but like if you can do 100 or so, and it's hard to actually draw 100 people to a show. Like, you know, it doesn't sound like a lot, but like it's like you can't rely on your friends for 100 people, you know?
Every night?
No. Or whatever, like for a band, for like any band, it's like, it just doesn't work. Especially, I don't know how it is in other cities, but Montreal, you kind of have to work, and it's a bit of a struggle, you know? And some bands get lucky and they kind of like really resonate with people, and they're able to like go from playing small little shows, and then like in a few months, they're at the point where they're like crossing over to like a bigger audience. But, you know, yeah, I just think, you know, before, like I know, like now I'm starting to get a lot of these bands that are just like, we're like trying to book a tour across Canada. Will you like, can we play your venue? And I just have to say, like, listen, this is the way it works. Like, this is a 300 capacity venue. You know, there's a rental fee. You can't just like book a show here, show up, and then because it's not like a bar where people come all the time, you know. It's like, this is a venue. It's like a theater that you have to rent. I mean, it's not a theater, but it's similar to that, you know. And that's kind of the way these mid-level venues work in Montreal. Like, they're not open unless there's a show here, you know. And there's not really a show here unless it's being booked and promoted and all that stuff. So yeah, management is, it's like a tough game, you know. Like, I think there's certain managers who've decided, like, I'm gonna make my life as a manager and like build a company and have a roster, and like it's a business, you know. But there's this part of management that's like this nether region. And in a way, it's like you kind of start because you love music and you believe, like, I guess the number one thing is you believe more than anything else in that artist, and you put your balls on the line or whatever to make that happen. And that's the most important thing, I believe. But from my perspective, just like in the last few years with the experience of seeing these bands go from, like, you know, when there's no money involved, it's great. Like, it's great to like have a manager who's fighting for you every day. But all of a sudden, it becomes a career, and then you're like, oh, well, my manager this, and it's almost like a continual conflict of interest in a way. You know, it's just like the manager's the person between you and the world, and like when things are going well, then you're like, oh, why do I need a manager? Like, he's not doing anything for me. I have like a label and an agent and this and that, and like, that's just someone taking a bit of, like, you know, a percentage of my income. And then if things aren't going well, you're like, well, my manager's not doing a good job. Like, why the fuck do I need him? So it's like a tricky situation. And I don't even know, like, you know, because I don't know what it would be like if I was just in management, you know. Like, I don't know if I'd be fulfilled, because you always, I mean, you want to be friends, but you find yourself kind of like, it's not just like a friendship, you know, but you kind of have to be that person for the person, you know, for the artist to talk to and like to bitch at and this and that. So to me, it's like just an interesting way to like work with people and work with artists and creative people, and like, I mean, to travel and like meet people and all these things. And it's gone like hand in hand with the festival. Like, when I was touring with Stars or Unicorns, I'd be going into clubs and other festivals and meeting people and saying, you know, like, by the way, I run this music festival called Pop Montreal. And so, I mean, the most important thing is just like, what I find is like that direct relationship with the artist. So yeah, I mean, so I do the management and the promotion, and it's all kind of like, it all kind of is one like mechanism in a way. And I think I'd have like a pretty different philosophy if I just was a manager, you know. Like, it would probably change my perspective, and I don't know, like, I don't know if I could just be a manager, because like the last few bands I've managed, kind of like, you know, like I realized pretty quickly that it doesn't last forever, and like if a band gets to a certain level, they're going to expect more. And so I've almost like, you know, I've totally come to terms with the fact that I don't necessarily want to like manage an artist like for 15 years and be that like professional manager. Like I don't really have a problem with artists kind of like getting to a certain point and then saying, oh, I need to be like more professional and have like someone take care of every single detail. Like I almost like prefer kind of being in there in the trenches with someone and working like intimately and like doing what I can and like kind of fighting for that artist and like, you know, pushing the artist to like do different things and new things, and then like creating this like, I mean, it's a challenge to me. It's like, oh, you find these cool, interesting bands that like you see with like 20 other people, and it like makes your heart beat or whatever, and then you're like, I can bring this to like a whole other level, you know? So that's, I mean, I think that's the challenging and interesting part, is like that ability to like kind of visualize and create and like, and believe and like, you know, push it to something that it wouldn't necessarily happen if you know, if the artist was just like on their own or whatever. For someone who wants to be a manager, I think that's like the most important thing is like like a real conviction and belief in the art and the artist, you know, because a lot of it is hard work and unrewarding, and so if you don't, you know, 100% believe that the art is something special and unique and interesting and deserving of like attention, and then you shouldn't really be doing it, because it's a bit thankless in a lot of levels, you know. And is it worth it for the money? You're not getting paid by the hour. You're not like bringing home salary until it's like almost too late or whatever, you know. So yeah, but I mean, that happens, and it's like if you really believe in it and you think, I mean, there's that whole other side to like being organized and like having a business together. And so if you really believe and have the vision, then like work your ass off and like just be like develop a company or whatever, or like a business model that that really is professional and takes care of like the business side and the banking and the, you know, the contracts and all like the like ASCAP, SOCAN things. Like there's all these like details that are 100% like, you know, like just as important as any kind of like real like conviction and belief and like and sweat that goes into management. Like you do need that other side, and that's why like the, you know, the management companies are successful, because they usually have like a, you know, like a handful of people that are working on the creative side and the business side. It's been pretty interesting. I think there's a lot of like factors, like a lot of developments that, you know, like a confluence of events and that came together to allow what, quote unquote, like a scene to develop. So you probably have to like go around talking to different people from their perspectives to see how each individual or group, you know, was able to like influence things or build. And I think like at the bottom line, it's like this belief that Montreal is a great place and worth investing into. Like, I mean, I think a great example, and I don't think any of this would be like really possible without the success of Constellation and Godspeed, and like, you know, I don't necessarily agree with all their like political convictions or this or that, but like the idea of, you know, building something and supporting like a community of artists, and like, and then once the success happened, reinvesting into the community. I think that's like the real key, is like the reinvestment. So there was some success, and like for instance, Casa del Popolo only developed and opened because of the success of Godspeed, because one of the members started like this small little art cafe, and then that success led to Sala Rosa opening, and so there's two venues that are really crucial to the development of the scene, and so you have that one little thing tied into, you know, coupled with Blue Skies Turn Black promoting shows, and then there's like Greenland, who have been doing punk rock shows for the last 12 years, and then and you know, all people coming into the city. I mean, there's just the mere fact that Montreal is like a great place to live, and it attracts a lot of young, interesting artists who aren't necessarily, like, especially within the context of Canada, it's like everyone either moves to Toronto, like you move to Toronto event because you want to like make money. It's like the center of Canada, et cetera, but it's more like in LA or New York. Like, you need a lot of money to live there, you need a job, this and that. Montreal is like a little more slack, it's a little more European, you know, people take it easy, they drink, they stay out later, they probably smoke more, they drink more coffee and take life a little easier, and therefore they're a little more appreciative of the arts in a way, and it's easier to be an artist here, and I think that's super important. For whatever reasons, there was some like really great bands that started coming here, and I think a lot of it is like, I mean, you could probably, I know Adam Gollner like has this argument, like the politics, like the Québécois, like separatist politics does affect this kind of like mentality. Like, we're kind of outside of it, you know, we're not in the center of Canada, we're not like, you know, we're outside of New York, we're outside of, like, you're kind of like in a bubble outside of like really kind of corporate industry influence, and even like the big industry influence in Quebec, it's very French, and so there's this like bubble created where there isn't a lot of like prodding and poking from like kind of mainstream corporate industry, and I think that allows for things to kind of develop more naturally and more self-sufficiently, and you know, you have like, I mean, studios, I mean, you saw Studio Plateau, but I mean, you gotta trace the whole history of Hotel to Tango, you know, which kind of developed out of the Constellation Godspeed thing as well. And so you look at the history of that studio, and then there's other studios like Break Glass Studios and Treatment Room. There's all these like interesting young studios that have developed that are like, you know, really, you know, they cut breaks for their friends, they do this and that. It's like more about, well, let's make really good music together and appreciate that. And so that, like, you couple that with just like a youthful exuberance and, you know, a lot of interesting, beautiful people, and like it's a fun place to hang out, and so there's like a good, yeah, there's like an interesting aesthetic here that doesn't take things too seriously. And so even if a band like Arcade Fire or Wolf Parade are incredibly successful, they know that it's like, this isn't like, you can't get away with being pretentious or just like, well, I'm a rock star now. Like, it just doesn't work. You like the whole aesthetic is like being humble and like, you know, keeping things like in perspective and realizing like you're just people kind of doing things together. So, I mean, people often, you know, like there's this kind of like mentality like that, like kind of tongue-in-cheek, like, oh, let's just make fun of everything because it's really like in the grand scheme of things we're not that important. So like to take digs at bands and just like kind of keeps everyone on their toes in a way, you know, like you kind of have to really like believe in what you're doing in order to do it.